Let's talk about emotional neglect. If you grew up believing that your emotions didn't matter, you might still be treating yourself this way as an adult without even realizing it. I have 5 key themes I'm going to share with you in the ways that emotional neglect can show up in our relationship with self. And the first is in ignoring your own feelings. When we push down, sadness, anger, or fear, thinking that there's no room for them, or this isn't a good time, I shouldn't express it. Maybe we're at work and we can feel like, not now, but we never allow for the now to happen. It's not like we give ourselves any space to acknowledge and express our emotions. We can, even in our own mind, get this kind of thought process where we think, oh, but that's too much, or I'm being too sensitive. Almost again, like we're taking that old story from our childhood and applying it to our relationship with self. The abuse, the neglect isn't currently happening, but it is within our own mind. It's like we're taking those old phrases that we heard and repeating them to ourselves. It's almost like we're taking the weapons that were used against us and now we're using them to injure ourselves yet again. And so if you find yourself pushing your feelings down all the time, telling yourself that oh, these are too big, or you're being too sensitive, or insert whatever, notice that and realize that that might be you bringing emotional neglect into your current life, in your relationship with yourself. And another pattern that I noted is kind of goes off of that nicely is downplaying your pain. It's so common for those of us who grew up emotionally neglected to immediately invalidate what's going on. Meaning we'll have something terrible happen to us and in our head we'll be like, oh, it's not that bad. Or if somebody says, oh my God, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Be like, oh, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. We'll immediately downplay it. We'll act like that wasn't anything worth getting upset about. Because back when we were growing up, whenever something bad happened to us, we were told either, overtly through someone verbally saying it's not that big of a deal, or what's more common with emotional neglect is in the lack of support. When we thought something big happened and we believed it to be really painful, nobody showed us that. Nobody supported us and allowed us to feel held and like it was okay to feel that way. So we got really used to just brushing things off, acting like it didn't hurt that much or it wasn't that big of a deal. And when we've heard that over and over, we have to remember, I want you to offer yourself some compassion as we go through this, that it's not just that something happened when we were growing up and so we still do that. It's think of the amount of times that happened. When we grow up in an emotionally neglectful household, that means from often birth until current day when we're learning about this, we've been told from our family and our caregivers, like our mom and dad usually, that our experience wasn't a big deal or wasn't important or wasn't valuable or we weren't valued. Over and over and over, day after day, week after week, year after year, you have to think of the compounding effects. So of course we're going to struggle. And this whole video is not meant to shame any of us. It's more to raise awareness so we can realize when we're doing it so that we can do something different. And I'll get to the ways that we can get out of it towards the end, but I have a few more patterns that it shows up in. The next is in over-functioning, or what you guys know I like to call toxic independence. What this means is that instead of asking for help when we need it and allowing ourselves to receive that help, we do it on our own. Not because we're independent. Independence is a good thing. We should be capable of doing some things on our own. This over-functioning or this hyper or toxic independence is more about the fact that we don't believe we can count on anyone. Again, that old story from our childhood of how I'm going through life and what I'm experiencing isn't important, or the thing that I think is really painful isn't that big of a deal. We've been shown time and time again that we aren't valuable, that we aren't important. Therefore, when we need to do something, we deep into our bones can believe that we can only count on ourselves. And I think a lot of us, especially the eldest daughters, I've talked about eldest daughters a lot in recent, especially with Taylor Swift's new song, but I think a lot of us felt that was the case, that we were the only one that would do it. We're the only one that was doing it. So we don't even ask people for help. And when people offer, we can often say no, I got it, even though we don't. And so if you find yourself going, above and beyond. Maybe you're in a group project at work or school and you're the only one doing it and you won't let anyone help. Or let's say you have to move and you aren't paying for movers and people are offering their assistance and you're not taking them up on it. You find yourself like, it's like that, I don't know if anybody's seen this video online, but there's this woman moving a couch down a sidewalk by herself, and she has the other, so she's holding one side of the couch and the other side of the couch is on like a wheeling office chair. And she's taking, I can do it all myself. I don't need any help. And I know there are a lot of instances when we can think that we can do it all on our own. I am this person too, by the way. It's definitely a trait that I struggle with. I can tell you from personal experience that it is much, much easier as well as enjoyable to do it with someone else and to test that hypothesis or that old belief we have that we can't count on anyone else. It's important for us to test that and prove us wrong. Prove that we can count on people and that when we do need help and we ask for it, people will show up. So notice if you're over functioning in your life or having what I call toxic independence. Another pattern in our relationships that shows we're emotionally neglecting ourselves is self-abandonment in relationships, when we prioritize harmony over honesty. And this kind of ties to what I was talking about at the beginning about people pleasing. When we don't allow ourselves to communicate an upset or a hurt and tell the person in our life, hey, I didn't like that, or can we talk this over? I don't like how things ended. When we don't do that, we don't allow ourselves to be seen and heard. We are essentially neglecting our emotional needs. Like I do this in relationships almost like in a passive aggressive way, right? I'll try to keep the peace. I won't say anything. I'll act like it's fine, but then I'll like do the silent treatment. Or I'll say like, I'm fine, even when I'm not, hoping or wishing that they would ask me how I'm doing. Essentially putting my ability to be seen and heard into their hands. Instead of what I should be doing, which is empowering myself, right? Taking the power back and being like, no, I can communicate what I feel. I can communicate my upset. And yes, I know that's hard. Trust me when I tell you that in practice, I'm getting better, but it's really hard to lean in and tell someone that they hurt your feelings because in doing so, we can feel really vulnerable. But it's important to notice if we are prioritizing, the keeping the peace rather than being honest about our experience and who we are. So if you're abandoning yourself in your relationships, pay attention. And the final theme that I see coming up in those of us who are emotionally neglecting ourselves now is avoiding vulnerability. Being vulnerable is scary, right? Even just the phrase itself. Like we don't want to make ourselves open and raw and expose it to someone who could hurt us. And I will agree that we should be discerning when we pick who we're going to be vulnerable with. However, I will tell you that without vulnerability, there isn't true connection. When we don't show people who we really are, when we don't tell them we're upset, when we don't express our emotional experience to someone, then we aren't truly seen by them because we're not showing them who we are. I wrote in my new book, Why Do I Keep Doing This, that comes out December 9th, pre-order now, soft plug, but I talk about it in my book, how I did that forever, where I felt too scared to show my true self in relationships. Therefore, I had a ton of romantic relationships that never went anywhere, right? Because how could they? They don't know who I am. I'm not showing them who I am. And friendships that felt really surface level, really just lacking in depth, in connection, because I didn't give it a chance. And that's the thing about avoiding vulnerability is we're not even giving our relationships a chance. And so if you find yourself internally doing this, right? If you think if you have a thought about that was really hard and yeah, that was really painful and you distract immediately, you find yourself doom scrolling on your phone, you find yourself getting up to keep yourself extra busy. When we find ourselves doing those things all the time, it's almost like internally we're not even allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in our own mind, like to be honest about where we're at, who we are, and what we think and feel. And again, just to offer some compassion that if you notice all these 5 kind of traits or signs within yourself, of course you do. If we'd been told since birth to now all the time that our thoughts and feelings weren't important and that they didn't really matter, then of course we're going to internalize that, and then without realizing it, repeat the patterns in our relationship with ourselves. Now that we know the kinds of patterns that we can see in our relationship with self, it's important to understand why we do it. And I've touched on it throughout, but I have a couple of notes that I want to make sure you hear. The first is that these patterns of behavior, whether it be us avoiding vulnerability, over-functioning, downplaying our pain, whatever it is, these patterns were survival strategies. They're things that we did growing up to mitigate the neglect that we were sustaining day after day, week after week, year after year. And so instead of shaming yourself and like compounding the pain you might already feel, I want you just to acknowledge that, hey, that's how I survived, and it's not serving me now, and I have to learn a new way to survive. So there's nothing wrong with what we've done. It's just not helping us anymore. It's almost like, we have to kind of like pat ourselves on the back and be like, thanks, we got through this, but then it starts to kind of be a weight instead of an aid. And so it's time to shed that old survival strategy. But it was the best we could do to be accepted. Our nervous system, when we're growing up in that type of scenario or in that type of environment, it was trained to suppress emotions because when we express them, they weren't met with care. And so what else were we going to do? If we kept expressing emotions and kept getting shut down or shut out, right? Not even connected with, it was like an effort in futility. Why would we keep doing it? And so it just got to be almost second nature to suppress. I was actually just talking to another member of our community, and she was sharing how, when her father died, she really wanted to cry about it, but she didn't even know how. And I think for a lot of us, if we grew up with emotional neglect in the past, currently we can feel like naming emotions is impossible. You're like, Katie, you're asking me to be vulnerable. I don't know what that looks like, right? And like I said, we'll get into those bits and pieces and how to heal. But I just think it's really important to understand kind of the why, like what caused us to do this. This was truly the only way we knew how to survive. But we can change. Let's get into what I think is the most important piece. And that is, how do we even start healing? What are some practical tips and the ways that we can get back on track? And I've kind of alluded to these throughout. The first is to start naming feelings. You guys know I love the feelings wheel. You can go to feelingswheel.com and look it up. But getting to know our emotional expression again is going to be key. And I know for a lot of us that can feel overwhelming. You're like, I don't even know where to start. I just feel numb, or I just feel disconnected. Those like numb and disconnected aren't actually feelings. It's the lack of feelings. And so instead, if you go to the feelings wheel and you can't even say if you're angry, sad, mad, happy, we don't know. Let's say that feels overwhelming from the get. A tip or a tool that I always offer to my patients and to you guys over the years is to tell me in journal form. Imagine you're talking to me. I want you to get your journal out, and I want you to write down what anger looks like to you. If I told you I was angry, what would you think that meant? And how do you think that feels internally? What's the expression within my body of anger? And then let's go to joy or happiness. And then let's go to sadness. And you can use the feelings wheel that way. Start in the middle with those, what I'd call like more primary emotions. Start there and work your way out, but just start telling me in journal form what that emotion feels like, what it looks like, and maybe what could cause it. And through this kind of homework, we will slowly learn more about emotions, and I believe get better and better at being able to identify them within our own life. So take your time with it. If we have never been able to express emotions ever and have never been met with any kind of care or understanding, be patient with yourself. This isn't going to be fixed in one day. It didn't happen over one day, right? So take your time. That's my first tip. Then the next idea that I had was to start learning how to validate your own experience. Now, this can be done in your head along your day as you're just going through things, or in your journaling in the morning or in the evening. Essentially acknowledging something that happened. Everyday things happen to us, right? And with us. Like we could say, oh, I had the really tough call with work, or I'm really stressed or worried about that presentation. We can have these things going on. When you have something going on, I want you to say to yourself, it makes sense that I feel this way. That's it. That's validating your experience. You could go deeper as this maybe gets easier or you get better at it. You can start saying things like, it's okay to feel sad. What's happening is really difficult and I am feeling really sad about it, right? We've gotten better at identifying the emotions we're experiencing and then we can validate that specific emotion. But overall, I think it's just really important, even myself included, I've been trying to do this more. It's just saying it's okay to feel stressed out. Life's overwhelming sometimes. Things don't go as planned. Instead of what we might have done before is like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, right? That invalidation, that minimizing of the experience or suppressing it altogether. Feelings? What feelings? No, we have to acknowledge it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel happy. Any number of emotions, just saying to ourselves, it makes sense that I feel this way. Practice it. Let me know how you feel. Tell me in the comments if you feel up to it. Another idea that I had was to challenge that self-dismissal. So when you find yourself saying like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, we do what we just talked about. Makes sense that I feel this way. I want you to take it maybe a step further and say, I deserve care too. My emotions are important. I know, really uncomfortable. That's why you might just want to try to do it in your head or try to do it in journaling. I know it's going to be difficult and we're going to want to push back. But just imagine like, if you were anybody else in your life, if this was your best friend or your child or your partner, wouldn't you say like, yeah, you deserve to be happy too. You deserve to feel care too. Your feelings are valid. Of course we'd think that. Why can't we offer that to ourselves? Practice. Give it a try. Okay. Then I also had practicing emotional presence. Therapists love to talk about sitting with feelings. I find it to be one of the most frustrating things to see online because a lot of people don't explain what that means. Sitting with feelings means this. You spend time allowing yourself to experience an emotion without trying to understand it, fix it, or change it in any way. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. You will find yourself, trust me, I've been doing this, I've been practicing. You know what I do? I grab my phone. I try to get on social media. Like as if that has ever helped anybody. But I find myself doing that because I think that like, oh, I need to, it's just uncomfortable, really, is what it is. It's not I need to do anything. Look at me even just trying to make up excuses. It's actually just I'm uncomfortable with how I feel. And sitting with feelings is uncomfortable. I don't want you to think it's easy. Therapists talk about it a lot because it's important. I didn't say I do it perfectly and I didn't say it was easy, but we'll stick with it and we'll try. So try to offer that to yourself. Try to allow yourself to, once you've identified it and I have a right to feel that way, can we sit with that sadness or that frustration or that happiness, right? Because joy and happiness can also feel just as dangerous to some of us. So whatever the emotion is, sit with it, acknowledge what it is, acknowledge what's coming up. Where do I feel it maybe in my body? I don't have to fix it. I don't have to change it. I can just let it be. And you might let it be for 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes. It's up to you. But even if it's 5 seconds, let's start there, okay? And the last little tip I had about this is to seek connection. Whether it's through a therapist, friends, group therapy, joining some kind of group activity. Unfortunately, in our day and day, I feel like a lot of us are really lonely, really isolated, and that only perpetuates this neglect. It's almost like when we don't allow ourselves to seek out connection with like-minded people, with people in our community, we're neglecting ourselves. We're not allowing the emotional connection to take place. And so pay attention if you are isolating. I would actually almost put that as another way that we can know if we're neglecting ourselves now is through isolation. I know some of you will come in the comments and be like, but I prefer to be alone. That's not true. I hate to call you out, but that is not true. A lot of people will say that, and I'm like, that's avoidant attachment. And that means that we are neglecting ourselves. Maybe because we were neglected in the past, but that doesn't mean we have to keep perpetuating it and keep feeling alone. You're not alone. It's important for us to feel seen, heard, and understood from other people in our community. So reach out, speak up. Like I said, therapists, friends, join a knitting group, a guitar group, a hiking group, a dog loving group. I don't care, whatever the group, cooking group, something. do something, get out there and talk to people, because in general, without those connections, we're never going to be able to feel emotionally supported. We're not going to have opportunities to be vulnerable with someone else and feel them hold the space for us. And that is so incredibly healing. Obviously, first inside, what we're talking about, this internal work, and then external, but that's going to be a huge piece of your growth. I hope you found this video helpful. I think emotional neglect shows up in more ways than we realize, and I really just want us to be able to identify this so that we can stop doing it to ourselves. Because like I said, that people-pleasing thought, I was like, oh my God, emotional neglect is everywhere. If you have another way that you think it shows up for you, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to pre-order my book, Why Do I Keep Doing This? It comes out December 9th. I love you. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.